Hi, everybody. Welcome to my channel. My name is Margaret Pinard, and you are on BookTube. I'm very happy to have you stop by. Today, we have a buddy read discussion. You'll notice there's green all around. It might be themed for the Irish Readathon if you're, a sleuth and can figure that out. I've got Maria from MH Books here with me today because we both read The Tainted by Cauvery Madhavan. So very excited to discuss this. Yes, we both have our paperback copies. But I love Maria to just introduce herself and her BookTube channel and tell us a little bit about where she's from.
Okay, so my name is Maria. I'm from Dublin, so the city that most people know in Ireland. And I have a small BookTube channel, which I've been very neglectful of recently because we've been very busy. But there should be a few uploads soon on the Dublin Literary Awards. And that's about it, really. I'm not like an expert on Irish history before we start, but I don't think you need to be to read this book, but just because it is historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm delighted to be here talking to Margaret, whose book I also have to read soon too, because
oh, bonus.
All these books.
Yeah.
I need to read them all.
I actually had at one point in my life planned to read the course of Irish history, which is like a tome, because I was going to study up to be a tour guide for French tourists coming to Ireland. I was like this close. Yeah. And I decided to go teach English in Turkey instead. So the road not taken. We'll never know. Okay, so before we jump in, I'm just gonna do the next week on my activities. They're all on Barrett's channel, surprisingly enough. So after today, Sunday, I may have Sundays on StreamYard if anyone takes me up on my offer to do the little tutorials. But beyond that, Tuesday, I'm doing a joint book tag with Barrett and Colin. That's called the Genre Playlist. And we'll be talking about our work and music playlists. And then tomorrow, actually, Saturday, is the big kickoff for the worldwide Readathon. So for AuthorTube. And I'll be on Barrett's channel at 5 in the morning because I am that dedicated. So if anyone else is up that early Pacific time, join us for the first social stream of the worldwide Readathon. And, we can help you get some productivity flowing and whatnot. So that is coming attractions, and I'll be sure to pop those down when I've got links. So back to our buddy read. First question is, why did you pick up this book?
Well, actually, I picked up this book back in April.
Mm-hmm.
Do this. You think I had to be used to using a camera?
It's backwards, to be fair.
I know. And I picked it up back in April 2021. Now, Ireland was still in lockdown at that stage, and there's a hashtag that goes around Twitter and Instagram on Read More Irish Women. And there's 30 tags, so 30 prompts for each day. And one of the prompts were what we call new Irish writers. Now, it seems a bit funny, but it just means people from other countries who have moved into Ireland. Mm-hmm. And this was a really popular book then. So I actually bought it while in lockdown because I still had the receipt in it when I was reading it, saying that it came from the books upstairs, and they couldn't do click and collect, so they had to post it. So they had to pay extra for the postage because we weren't allowed into shops. So it's been not long since.
Okay.
It was big last year. So
got it. Okay. I picked up this book. I ordered it, I think, from Blackwell's because some of the books that are only available in the UK and sort of Ireland market, that's the easiest way and the most price reasonably way to get them here. And so I had ordered this because I heard Aoife at Words of Clover talking about it, and I thought it was just perfect for my niche. Like, it's historical fiction, one, but also I've had this like yearning to do something about the Scots planters and how they were what their motivations were for coming over to Northern Ireland and how that evolved, and how you have the different basically castes within the British Empire being played off against each other, which is the very same topic but halfway around the world. Yeah, so that really interested me, and this took a little detour. It wasn't exactly what I was thinking it would be, but was a good book. So
Very good.
that's why we picked up the book. What about general impressions? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Yeah, thumbs up. Thumbs up. It was a 4-star read for me. I was extremely good storytelling.
Good.
And
Yeah.
it's extremely good storytelling. It is a fabulous, fabulous story, and it's told with such love and kindness for all its characters. You really get Cauvery's love of her characters and who she likes as well.
Mm.
While I was washing my dishes, I was listening to an interview with her on the book just before this, and if she feeds a character in the book, it means that she particularly likes them, which I thought.
Oh, okay, that's great.
Really
That's great.
yeah.
We often ask about like what's your favorite food in fiction, and it's always like I don't remember, but the food in this one, because they were serving a guest and they had to like remark on whether it was foreign food or native food or whatever sort of gradation it was for the different casts, was spectacular. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it made you so hungry. I was actually really shocked too, because the beginning of the book, which is set in India, is extremely Irish. It is not something that in Ireland that we know a lot about is, or we talk a lot about is during the 1920s, there were still Irish Catholics fighting for the British Army at the time and for the Raj at that time in India. And it's something that's really neglected from history. So something I knew nothing about really. I was aware that there were Irish troops, but I mean, I didn't. This book is actually based on a real life event, which is, yeah, it's just.
So did we want to go into the? Do we want to say the premise? Maybe the premise. So the book is about the flowering of a mutiny within a certain regiment of British troops, an Irish regiment of British troops in the British Raj in India, and in 1920. So it basically takes a few characters who are related and in different classes, races, social positions to give us a flavor of how they all interacted and what their motivations were. It sort of wraps up that storyline and then takes us to 1982 with 2 generations on, like what they're dealing with and how they meet coincidentally, and what still persists in people's thinking and people's expectations, as well as what has changed. And I read a review that called the second part a romance. So
it is.
Yeah. So if that helps you to decide whether or not it's your favorite book, I think you can call it a romance. And that's also in India, set in a, I think, fictional region called Dandagiri.
Yeah,
I didn't research whether it was fictional, but I did find that it was called.
Yeah, that's why I was listening to her interviews to see, was that in a fictional town? It is fictional. She based it on a real town. I've forgotten the name now because I was listening while I was washing dishes. But she based on a real town and changed the name just in case she got any of the information wrong.
Yeah,
so we give out to her.
And it's called the Kildare Rangers in the book, but it was actually the Connaught Rangers. Yeah. So based on real events, in case anyone has, it has to be based on real events if it's a historical fiction kind of hang up. Let's get this elephant out of the room. Yes, I did get a haircut a week ago, and I love it. I'm going to get it a little shorter even, and probably some blue. So there you go. And Eva is here. Hello. Eva is here. Hello. Listening. See, doing dishes or doing work, we can listen along. It's great. All right. So that's the premise. That's, let's see, my general impressions. I also gave it 4 stars, thumbs up. It was more tender and like sweet than I was expecting. There are definitely like biting, humorous pieces, but overall, I think it was more slowed down and tender, if that makes sense. So yeah, I like the story unfolding as it did as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Who would you recommend this book to?
Who would I recommend this book to?
Yeah.
Anybody. Actually, I don't normally read romances, but it is actually the first bit is a romance as well. It's a bit of a tragic romance, but it's a romance. And the second bit is romance. Some people like romances, people like historical fiction, people who want to understand people and how, you know, they're caught up in dramatic events in this book, and they're caught up before and after dramatic events because it occurs during 1920. So it's before Ireland becomes independent of the British Empire, but also before India becomes independent of the British Empire. And then how they deal with it in 1982, 60 years on, how the generations, how, you know, and how they've dealt with it afterwards. So I think it is for that kind, yeah, that's who I would recommend it to. Who would you say, Margaret?
I would say, yeah, people who like a substantive romance. It doesn't, I mean, it conforms to formula in the ending and the expectations and everything, but it feels more substantive. It feels like there's definitely pieces that you would want to consider and sit with. There's probably I don't know if I would give a content wording because it's pretty subtle, but there's discussions of the minute shading of racism that exists at every level of society, both in 1920 and in 1982, which I think is fascinating and interesting to like pull apart and tease apart. Yeah. So, but that is part of the book, and that is part of the reading experience, in case anyone's wondering. Yeah. On that note, in terms of like, what is the interesting piece of being like former colony of the empire, who did we have sympathy for? Because I find that often when someone writes a book from this point of view, it's very important who we have sympathy for and where that indicates their values are. So what did you think we were being directed to root for, or, you know, like want at the end? Without spoilers.
I think we're being made sympathetic for a lot of different characters, the characters who are caught in between cultures, because the book is about Anglo-Irish, the Anglo-Indians, and which she particularly concentrates on, she obviously loves, and they're actually also the Irish Catholics fighting for the British Army. So all these three, okay, they're doing things which should be obnoxious. I mean, the Anglo-Indians are trying to be Anglo or Irish or Scottish or English, ignoring their own cultural heritage. The Irish Catholics, for some reason, are fighting for their enemy. You know what I mean? Which is insane. But you're given the sympathy for an awful lot of people, an awful lot of characters, and just for having, you know, life isn't that easy, and you get caught in between cultures and ethics and all that kind of thing. You get sympathy for people. I think it comes throughout the books, even the priest, which Father Jerome, I wrote write the names down because I'm terrible at names.
Oh yeah, let's dive into the priest. He was fascinating.
He was fascinating. He's her favorite character, and he says some horrible things in that book. You know what I mean? But you understand. You do actually have. This is what he was brought up with. The person who frustrated me the most was Rose, actually.
Oh yeah. Wait,
but then you have to, but you have to remember that she was only 18 in the book. Yeah. You know, so she has some. She frustrated me a few times.
So just to bring, I think, an important word for what you're describing about everyone being caught between two cultures, there's a lot of intersectionality, right? So there's a lot of people with multiple identities, and they choose in these instances really to just close off part of their identity, which is not, I think, something that we're encouraged to do today, but embrace all aspects. So it was interesting to see the other side of this when people would just say, oh, I'm not Indian, I'm Anglo-Indian, and that means I'm Irish, and I'm going home to Ireland, even though I've never been there, I wasn't born there, and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, but what? So yeah, intersectional tangling with that.
In the 1980s, it sort of pushed us on again to the two generations after that, because they're actually living the consequences of their grandparents' intersectionality in a way. They live in the consequences of that, because they now have to redefine themselves, embracing the other part of the cultures that weren't embraced at the time. So
Yeah. So
You know,
people,
yeah.
the people that we hear from, we have several points of view. In 1920, we have the love interest, the Private Flaherty, the priest, the young girl, Rose, and Sergeant, and the upper class gentleman and his wife. And then in 1982, we have the grandson of that Anglo-Irish upper class gentleman come to do a thing in India, and a collector who is Indian, a Anglo-Indian brother and sister who are fascinating, who are descended from the people who they knew. And so they reconnect, and there's like a renegotiation of their relationships. So, yeah, who did I have sympathy for? I find that I had a lot more sympathy for Private Flaherty than the people in the book did. And I thought that was kind of, I don't know if I was being manipulated, but I was like, come on, guys, give him a fair chance. Like, we were in his head, so we knew what he was thinking. But, you know, like,
Yes.
all the other characters, especially the ones in 1982, are like, you know, he can ride out of town on a rail, because they thought he just was a terrible person. Yeah. So, before we get to my next question, let's see. Let's catch up. Vera says, I didn't know there was a hang up with historical fiction needing actual history. You want to have your history right. So if, for example, my family in the Keening is not based on an actual family, but is based on a general social trend. So that's not based on actual history. So if someone might have given that to me as a critique, for those people, this is based on an actual event with fictional characters. This is a fine line. It's a fine line. Jim's Books, Reading, and Stuff. Hello, hello. Romance isn't really my jam usually. I would say it's more conversational than, it's not anything near like smut. It's very polite, and I wouldn't even say fade to black. There's like hardly any of that like romance smarminess. Would you, like, it's a
No.
romance because of the conventions, not because of the style, you know?
Yeah, I wouldn't normally read a romance myself, and I really enjoyed this one. So I think there's so much more to it than that as well, because there's so much thinking around.
Yeah.
Also, characters in their lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Barrett apparently reads romances during the holidays. I don't know. Your heart being eased near the holidays. That makes sense to me. I've popped in the link in case anyone wants to grab this from the bookshop and help indie bookstores. That's interesting. Living the consequences of our grandparents' decisions, right? And who gets to know the decisions that their grandparents made, actually? Do you have any idea about, like, if I think about that, I think about moving around perhaps with his job, my dad's dad, and how that might have influenced things for my family. But does that bring anything up for you?
Well, see, in my case, actually, it would be actually being this little bit older. So my grandparents would have been around, you know, children around about the time that this book is set in, the original bit in the 1920s. And my mother's side of the family would have been Irish nationalists, whereas my father's family in 1916, his great granddad actually ran into no man's land and won a medal for bravery. We only found out about 6-7 years ago, because it was kept a secret, because this is an important part in this book as it happens. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because 1916 is when the Irish rebelled originally against the British.
The Easter Rising.
So after the First World War, which is when this book is set, it's difficult to be from the British Army in Ireland, and it's hidden.
Right.
It's hidden a lot, and it's kept a secret, which is why it was very interesting to read this book set in 1920, and these are all Irish Catholics still fighting in the British Army. Yeah. And these were the last ones, because this is the end of it. 1922. It's an Irish free state, so there's no more Irish men fighting in the British Army, as in regiments, obviously. Right, still here if you wanted to.
I don't really understand the whole thing about armies having regiments that are from an area, because to me, like, you enlist in the army and then, like, you're put in whatever division has the next thing up. I don't know how the army works in that sense. So if Shannon is watching this and wants to tell me how the military in the U.S. at least works, because I never understood that. Like, In the Scottish history, I sort of get that it's because the chief would be calling up his own, villages or like landholders or renters, but like the people who would come from different places and I don't know. It just sort of like blows my mind. It's something I don't have expertise in. So sometimes a slice of life balances out the story's pacing. How did you think it was paced? I think I kind of touched on that with like the gentleness part, but what did you think?
Yeah. The pacing, I thought the pacing slowed down a little bit towards the end. You're reading something that's interesting, but did it slow down? I thought it slowed down a little bit towards the end as well. Pacing.
Okay, I have a plot point that I'm going to save for the spoiler section afterwards because we're going to try to be non-spoilery for another like 10-15 minutes. My grandparents, Jenna says, were newlyweds in 1921. The world was a mess then, just as it is now, 100 years ago. Yeah.
It was a very different world in 1921. It's very different in the 1920s. I mean, and what 1982 is, that's 50 years ago, isn't it? How long is 1982? And so it's a very different world then. But the difference between those two time periods was very interesting in this book as well, between the 1920s and the 1980s. And then, it was a very different world.
Yeah. A Long, Long Way. Have you heard of this one or tried that? Author?
No.
Sebastian Barry?
I know the Sebastian Barry particularly. I've read a few of his books, but I've not read A Long, Long Way yet.
Jim's recommending it has some poignant parts, so that might be another one to seek out. Yeah. Good deal.
Yeah. People have to know that when this was set, Ireland was part of the British Empire, so we were part of our army was the British Army. I mean, we had in 1916 declared independence, given ourselves a constitution, made ourselves independent, but only in name. So it depends on where you think our official government was still the UK. So we were either rebellious or we were traitors, depending on your point of view at the time. So people would have been in both. There's stories of in 1916, somebody in the British Army was shot by his own brother from the Irish rebels at the time. So and it wasn't on purpose, as in he didn't know he was shooting his brother's regiment at the time, whatever it's called.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, these things did happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And Anita is saying modern military organization is quite different than historical armies. Good to know. Good to know. Similar to what's going on in Ukraine. A testament to how short human life is. Maybe that's writer snaps for Jenna's comment. Nice. Okay, let's tackle the racism. Okay, so I said it's at all levels, meaning, and here's an interesting thing I found, that they seemed to use animals a lot as the sort of vehicle for explaining this. So there was a parrot, there was native birds, there was, what else did I mark down? The tiger cubs. I think there was one more. And it just seemed to be a very convenient way for the author to play out how people were thinking people were striated, how they had like natural designations, if you will. And did that pop out at you, or what did you think of how people just let comments fall and you're like, okay.
I was surprised. I was surprised mostly though that normally when you come across this, you get very kind of like, how dare they speak this way or think that way. I just thought it struck me as kinder that Cauvery was being very kind to her characters. She was letting you know at all times they didn't know any better at all times, and because everybody was doing it. Everybody was doing it in the book. Everybody is so racist, but the whole societal structure was there was one point actually where I think it's what's it Michael Flaherty, the soldier, is waiting for the train, and he's thinking about how all the Indians are coming off, and you know what I mean, like, and have, thank goodness they're not allowed in the second or third class. You
Yeah.
don't need you're not allowed in first class like he is, or I mean, like,
Yeah.
and I was thinking he wouldn't be allowed in first class in Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It's
you
interesting
cheeky
how
bastard.
easily.
Like, you
What's that?
cheeky. I said, no, I cursed a little bit. But you cheeky person, like, he wouldn't have been allowed. That's the
Yeah.
whole point. It was actually all the way through. It was everybody was, but it was almost more. It was the societal structure at the time. I think it came across very well that she was, I mean, she was talking about this is the way it was without and this is without too much
Without being,
explanation.
yeah, demonstrating, not showing. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
showing, not telling. And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
without being overly hurtful, if that's a thing. And I
yeah,
don't know. It still might be hurtful to read these things from that perspective and say, like,
yeah.
this is how people used to treat my people, But
I was interested in that. She was talking about she had not gotten any Anglo Indians to read the book.
oh, a sensitivity reader.
Before, and an Anglo Indian came up to her during when she just first released it and said she was very angry at the book. She hadn't read it yet, and she was
Oh,
very angry at the idea of being portrayed like this in
mm,
this. And she gave this person a copy of the book, and said, "Come back to me." And they came back and said, "Well, actually, it was very kindly done, and that
yeah,
yes, and all of that is true." And it was everything, including racism, is shown with kindness. And I thought it was a nice relief of a way to read a book that actually the author was being kind to all people in all strata
trying
and
to
acknowledging, yet acknowledging that all of this is wrong, but showing it in a kindly way. I thought.
understand. So the first time I flagged something, it was the sergeant talking to the private saying, "Flaherty, you've bought yourself trouble," he said sternly. "Dogs and monkeys are a nuisance, but at least they can't speak," because they're talking about a parrot. He says, "I'll put manners on him, Tom. You can see he's intelligent." And I just, there goes the British Army civilizing the rest of the world, even though they weren't asked to, like, um, yeah. And then there's another, the priest sees the parrot as well. But he's talking to, here it's written right in the same paragraph. So these Anglo-Indians all have a chip on their shoulder. They've mixed blood, you see, and are highly complexed as a result, which I'm not even sure what that means. "Ah, I see you've bought yourself a parrot. Native birds are fierce rude, don't you know?" And then he explains like what to do to tame the parrot. And I just thought it's not subtle, but it's like twisty, and I appreciated that from the writer. Did you say her name Cauvery, or I was saying Cauvery? Is that wrong?
It's I don't know because she is
Okay,
Indian, but it seemed to be Cauvery that she was being introduced as at
Cauvery.
the
Okay,
time.
those
So I will not say I'm pronouncing her name right. Her name, she is Indian. She's a
yeah,
stronger Irish accent than I do because she's lived in Ireland.
yeah, yeah,
And she uses the odd Irish word as in Oscailga, as in actually in Irish.
yeah.
I think it's hilarious, but
That's cool.
but yeah, her name is an Indian name, so I might be
Yeah,
pronouncing it
we're
wrong.
gonna do our best there. So one of the things you talked about, what the being cheeky because you're one type of person or one level in one place and a different level in another place. I thought was interesting. So there's multiple characters who reflect on the fact that in India they have a certain type of standing, and in Ireland they have a different type of standing.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
you had
yeah.
people come back from soldiering in India, and I think it was the grandfather who came back, and there was like a drippy old mansion that had to be maintained, and like they were complaining about
Yeah.
that. But whereas in India, because of the white skin, because of the colonial aftermath and everything, you were salamed and you were feted and you were, not charged extra for the electricity that you used and all this kind of stuff. And I thought that was interesting. It's like a code switch almost, or like a different
Yeah,
register. How
yeah.
would that be to have to like live in that world where you're two different people depending on where you are?
And I think that's true for a lot of white people. You go to different parts of the world and you're treated differently.
True.
I mean, even something as simple. I went to Australia in the 1990s, and I'd been in Ireland, and I was definitely working class in Ireland, and I would have been treated, you know, as a certain, because it's still very structural society at the time. Not as much anymore because there's more people in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in Australia, nobody knew that. Nobody knew that my level was considered lower than somebody else's level.
Yeah.
You know? And I just like it would just like even then just subtly. So
Yeah.
can you imagine, like, you know, in going from India when you're being salamed back to Ireland. One of the characters is an Anglo-Irish one, and not particularly being liked in the 1980s still, because they came from the original English power structure.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know.
Yeah. And what was interesting is that you had an Anglo-Indian character who went to Australia and came back, the great uncle, and he said when he went to Australia, he was seen as Indian, and so he had to sort of fake his happiness to his parents because they had all these high hopes for him, blending into the Australian culture.
That he would pass as white, not and that's the shock of it, isn't it? Like, you know, they really, really wanted him to pass as white.
Yeah.
And you just and I think that's some of the niceness of some of the theme that comes into the second section, where we have the Anglo-Indians, and we have an Indian character, and we have an Anglo-Irish character, and they just all learn to accept each other within that. Now, I mean, they're still within a society where all of them are being slammed, and you know,
exactly. They still have people in the forest.
All the other ones amongst themselves.
Yeah.
They learn to get on, you know, and you can see from it, it's quite a new thing. They didn't expect it, like, you know, original. There's prejudice from the beginning again, from the Indian character on the Anglo-Indian character, you know what I mean? Because obviously they're uppity, like, you know. So I just thought that it was great that, you know, that at least that was explored, that at least within themselves they can learn to be friends and have romances, and, you know.
And the fact that the writer put it in the exact same locales, like you're in the same house of the tea plantation, you're in the same barracks that was turned into a house, you're in the same like piggery attached to the, you know, old army rationing spot, and it's just like that makes it pretty obvious, like you're setting the new standard up against what has fallen into dereliction, is no longer useful, so let it go. And I was like, yes. I like that. I'd
love to see the story then again, maybe in the set now again, what happens now the next couple of generations down the road as well.
82. Gosh, that's about 40 years ago. That's how old I am, so making fun. But India's changed so much. I wonder if it would be reflected in a rural town like that. I also appreciated the fact that they took up, Cauvery did, the special conservation area as one of the sort of side projects of one of the characters, just to bring light to that fact that hunters and traffickers and all this kind of stuff is transforming the face of India in the capitalistic way, just like the Raj did in a empirical way. And so you're battling similar demons just from different sides, unfortunately.
And I liked the fact that they went out on a safari to go and see wild dogs in the 1980s section, whereas the one before that they've been hunting tigers and killing elephants in the process. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was graphic and terrible. Where the 1980s one was more about, you know, the wonderfulness just to see the wild dogs in nature, you know, because nobody had seen them, you know, for such a long time. And, you know, just to see them was a privilege, not to go hunting them. And the difference between the attitudes, even though they, you know, we're still not being very good even now at conservation, but even just to see that progression, that different values.
At least by this social class. I don't know that it would be the same for the people who lived in the forest or the people who were, you know, like standing guard at the gate or everything. So everything's got gradations, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about did you want to say more about Father Jerome and the particular role he played, or like sort of things he was struggling with, because he sort of stands out.
What do you think of Father Jerome? To be honest, yeah. What do you think of Father Jerome?
I feel like he was sort of the counterpart to the sergeant in like battling for the conscience of the people who were deciding to mutiny. And so he had a similar level of authority over them, being the priest of the regiment, but they chose or sort of got swept into deciding against him. Yeah. Do you know who? Okay, it's a little magical, but do you know who my favorite character might be?
Who?
Dr. Swami.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
He's barely there, but he plays such an important role. So I liked that. I liked that a lot.
Oh, he's a lovely man. When he came back in, I went like, oh my god, it can't be. It is. It's the same one.
Yeah, that was cool. That was cool.
Yeah.
What about, okay, so we were talking a little bit about class in terms of change in attitudes regarding the environment and conservation stuff. There was an interesting, let's see, page 267. I'm going to use this as quote to tease out this thing. So May, the young woman in question in the modern timeline, was a good dancer, lost her inhibitions quickly. By the end of the first dance, she was instructing Mohan as he fumbled with the steps. Mohan is the Indian character who has got a thing for May. Ronnie kept playing the piano, and as Mohan twirled and swung May around, he was struck by the Anglo-Indianness of the whole tableau. This is what he had been warned Anglo-Indians did. They drank, played music, and danced. And I was like, that's from his old way of thinking about putting them in their place. And I thought that was very interesting. It felt like that was the Britishness rubbing off, like that the upper class British, like playing the record player, dancing while the world burned outside the window kind of feeling. Did that come across to you, or is that just my like baggage bringing to this?
Well, I haven't marked it. It didn't strike me at the time. I suppose what it makes me think is that it's actually she's saying the opposite by saying, by this is what he was warned about. But isn't that wonderful? He's loving.
He's partaking in it and enjoying. Yeah,
and he's loving something that he was warned about. What struck me though is probably more that the Indian society was very so conservative and still so conservative in the 1980s. That dancing was considered like you don't, if you go with an Anglo Indian, they're going to dance.
Yeah. So racy. You're racy flappers, right? It's like coming back.
Oh, shocker.
Yeah. I got Barrett. You bought it. I use an affiliate link. Yes, I did. I put the disclaimer in the description though, so you can't dig me. Eva says she added it to her wish list. We'll use the affiliate link when it's time to do the buying. Appreciate that, Eva. Thank you, Jim. Not empirical. That means something different. Imperial is the word I was looking for. Thank you. And Barrett is still bitter about Ricky suggesting if I cut my book budget, we could buy more house. Oof. Hey, priorities and trade-offs. That's all I'm saying. Sean, the book maniac, rated it 5 stars on Goodreads. Interesting. I'll have to look up his review.
He didn't review it on Goodreads. I commented on his review at the time. I looked it up to see did any of my friends read it on Goodreads.
Oh, okay.
So he didn't review it at the time.
Oh, okay. So just the star rating.
Okay. On his channel.
Got it. That's what I meant. I should watch the video where he talks about it because we don't often agree on reviews. So that's why I was like, wait a minute, I should check this one out then.
Do you think it's a Sean the Book Maniac book?
Borderline.
Yeah.
He likes quiet novels that are sort of quirky and like in your face is what my experience has been. So this is less in your face, but it's more the quiet side. So I don't know, maybe the topic is up his alley. Eva's excited to redo her shelves with all these books and can't wait to see it. Yeah. We love a good redecoration, right? Okay. What else do I have? Dehumanization. Oh, I know what the other animal was, the cobra. There was a throwaway mention of a cobra being cornered and killed after a half hour of high drama by the servants. And I thought, there it is again, the very unsubtle thing about the animals taking the part of the conquered and marginalized populations and just like casting it away as part of high drama, like a soap opera. So I loved how she did this sort of throwaway stuff. But okay, dehumanization. I saw this right away when, let's see, page 73, Rose is talking about her Anglo-Indianness. And what's that?
Yeah, go on.
She's talking to her diary. That's what it is. So the Dear Diary of the young woman in 1920. I remember the occasion well, because along with 4 other 6-year-olds, I'd been picked to stand in line and hand the vicereine a posy of Kurinji when she visited the regimental school. Unfortunately, my mother, who'd been very ill for 3 months, died the night before my big day. So she starts with, I remember the occasion very well because I was selected to give the big wig a posy of flowers, and my mom dying got in the way. And I was just like, okay, that's an interesting way to sort your priorities, girl. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
It does demonstrate a lot, though. I mean, like, it meant so much. Your status in society meant so much. You know, that your relationship with your mother was like very much like, oh no, like, you know.
Yeah. So that paragraph jumped out at me because it was just so, your eyes are trained on the prize of like how closely you can be absorbed into whiteness rather than your close human relationships and like the humanity of the person who raised you, and not the color of their skin or the way that they taint you, because it's called the Tainted. And there's a couple lines where they call out the fact that the Anglo-Indians, one of the characters, I think, says it twice, that they are tainted because they're not one and they're not the other. And so they're always, a fish. Yeah. Fish? I don't remember what the quote is, but there's something like, a bird in the sky can love a fish in the water, but where would they live? What's that from?
I don't
know. Someone tell me where that quote is from, because it's something classical and I can't remember. But yeah, dehumanization of the marginalized population. Okay, I've talked a lot. Let me pause and say, like, comment, subscribe, glare of doom. Okay, did you have anything you wanted to bring up in the stream? Because I'll take a break from all the notes that I took that I wanted to raise. See if you have comments.
Do we have comments that we want to answer? Yeah.
Oh, or did you have things specifically that you wanted to bring up so I can take a break from like my all my little notes here?
I can't think now offhand stuff that I want to bring up. I'm blocking. I'm sorry. That's because it's fine. What happened with the scribbles, but
what about nostalgia? So I think that's a really relevant issue for today, especially in the US, that nostalgia can be dangerous because you're yearning for something that may not have existed, but it's a colored version of the past. And it prevents you from learning and growing, right? And expanding benefits for everyone. And there was a really killer line near the, let's see, page 164, Vela Karans are known for their penchant for graveyards. And I just thought, like, the foreigners who come to India have a penchant for graveyards because it's the fading glory or the past that is a graveyard that is derelict, falling down, and holds secrets, perhaps. That jumped out at me as particularly deft on the author's part. So anything about nostalgia pop out to you?
I would say that it's maybe the Anglo-Indians always thinking that they came from a country because their parents had, say, Irish roots. So say we're Anglo-Irish. So the parents, in one case, the dad is Irish, and and they think that they come from this town in Ireland and they're going to go back to this town in Ireland. And I think there is nostalgia in that father is talking about a town he hasn't lived in 30 or 40 years. and he doesn't know what it's like anymore. And it's nostalgia for a time that no longer exists. And there's a piece even where that Father Jerome is talking about the bacon wallah, which is the Irishman, Sean Tooney, isn't it? Yeah, the bacon wallah. And like, you know, saying like he should have gone back when the army left. He's been living in India for 30 years and he's been selling bacon to the regiments and from the things. And he has an Anglo-Indian wife and his Anglo-England daughter, who is one of the main characters. And it's the you know, oh, he should go back to Ireland. He should have gone back to Ireland. So it's like the Ireland he would go back to now as a British soldier and somebody who lived in India. It's very different. So it is that very much that nostalgia as well as, you know, the places that people identify with and long for don't exist anymore. They're not the places that exist now.
They don't exist yet.
Or they don't exist yet. You know what I mean? I think that's what happens. People, it doesn't really exist, though, does it?
Yeah. You just like triggered something. Yeah, triggered something in my head about the U.S. context, which is the African American soldiers who went to fight in World War I and even World War II and fought alongside French troops and were treated like people, and then came back and had to be like doing the same old shit that they did in the Jim Crow South, for example, and deprived of their rights and deprived of their dignity, and having to curb their feeling of what am I going for? Initiative, or, you know, like having to get small again in effect, and how terrible that would be for your psyche and, you know, for the whole society. So yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't drawn that parallel before, but yeah. And thank you, Jim. If a fish and a bird fell in love first uses a quote in the 1998 Drew Barrymore film Ever After. Yes, Barrett has a tip. Fish and a bird could fall in love, monsieur, but where would they live? That's what Drew Barrymore says to the Leonardo da Vinci character. Ah, I love that movie so much. Barrett saying it's also a clever way to separate and segregate communities if they were united, could challenge the class system that holds us all back. Yes, exactly. I don't know if the British were the first at doing that the world over, like in the 17th century or what, but it has just been repeated and repeated and repeated, and we got to figure out a way to like reverse that ish, if you will. Yes, Ever After. Classic. Good one. See, I bring the good quotes. What can I say? Let's see. Independence. It's difficult to stop a chain of events. If you guys have any questions, I guess pop them in if this is stirred up any questions for you guys. And then we'll just have to put the spoiler banner up if we want to talk about the spoiler stuff.
Yeah.
Like the ending, just for the like. So if you watch it on the replay, we'll have this banner up and we'll just talk about it for a few minutes at the end. So ending. You can mute us. How about that? I was surprised by the ending because I never see things coming, but Maria saw it coming about 30 pages before, she said.
Yeah, I just all of a sudden I went, oh my God, maybe she's still alive. Because they're very much looking for so I feel terrible spoiling.
Well, we can talk around it because we don't want to like
but yeah, that she ends up being alive in the end after we thinking she was dead for so long, and all the characters thought she was dead. But something struck me about the way that the priest had been told, and how sick he was when he was dying. That's how we're told, and so there's something about that made me suddenly.
I thought
something about it. All of a sudden, I just kind of went, well, he was dying, so was he really told that she was dead? How do we know she's dead? You know, how do we actually know who's dead?
Oh, I see what you mean.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, because
I thought she was dead because he was seeing a spirit in the corner. He was seeing like a manifestation of his guilt, really. The priest who, like, you know.
Yeah,
couldn't make it happen, couldn't make a happy ending happen for this girl, sees her as like a spirit when he's about to die. And so that was his guilty conscience. But yeah, I didn't see
that's the way I read it at first, but after a while, it's just suddenly, as I was getting towards the end, we're hearing about all the administrative problems that they were having, just trying to find the paperwork. And then I'm like, I'm dead. I don't think he's dead.
I can bring up my plotting point. So the thing that was a little frustrating to me with the pacing is that there were like 4 chapters in a row with Mohan's POV where he was like, I'm going to tell her I love her. How am I going to do this? When's the right moment? And it would end and I would think, okay, that's it. He did it. And then he'd be like moaning about not being able to do it in the next chapter. And I was like, dude, what's your deal? Come on. But it was because they had to like reveal and have like the, the moment and everything. So I don't know, that was a little artificial. It didn't clue me in. It just felt a little artificial, Yeah. Did you have any other like gripes or like little things that made you impatient or anything else that was like,
it was just, I just thought that the timing and the pacing of everything in that last second half just didn't quite. Yeah, there was something off and I couldn't tell. I'm not a writer, so I couldn't tell exactly what it was off with that timing. But, it might have been like because it was 4 chapters of him trying to say,
Yeah.
But yeah, something about the timing just didn't quite. I just kind of went, this could have done with an edit. Felt like I needed an edit in there somewhere. There was, why are we told all of these other pieces? I did love the way that she had a parrot. Did she have the parrot from the beginning of the story?
Yes, I loved that. I saw that and I was like, oh,
again.
That was perfect.
Yeah, I loved it. Like
perfect, like circle, and she talked. She wasn't mute. I liked that ending. Yeah,
I loved it. I did love that everything in it again was eventually all wrapped up. You forgot something. I love when you forget there is a loose end somewhere and it eventually ends. That's the parrot too.
I thought it was interesting in the second half where you're in both the POVs of the men who are falling for May, and I didn't know like which one she liked until the end. So it was like, who do you root for? Well, eventually we moved mostly into Mohan's point of view. So it was very direct. It wasn't like mysterious, but she was a blank slate, but we were being led to like root for Mohan, and that's
but Mohan would be, when you think about it, the best character to pick as her eventual love interest, because about the problem about being Anglo-Indian was she wanted to be either Irish or English. At that stage, these characters want to be English, but whatever, you know what I mean? And to actually get over the conflict, like, it's okay to be Anglo-Indian in India, and, for an Indian to fall in love with his mother. Wasn't his mother funny?
Yeah.
Tried to put him off. This girl. She was
did it sound like an Irish mother with the guilt a little bit? I mean,
or a Jewish mother, you know what I mean? One of those
exactly.
You have to love the right type of woman.
Right. Yeah. First it was anyone but a Muslim. Your sister married a Muslim. Okay, anyone but an Anglo-Indian, and like, yeah.
I loved the but I just thought that was a nice ending in the fact that people are starting to at least get over their own prejudice against race.
On both sides.
Yeah, on both sides. Yeah.
Good. Okay, are we done with the spoiler? Can I take that down and we could like wrap up other thoughts? Okay, excellent. Good, because Sandy just walked into the room. Hi, Sandy. Jim was pointing out that the Spanish were also experts at dividing and ruling when they took on the Aztecs. Interesting. All right. That was 16th century. I guess they started their empires about the same time, or were the Spanish a bit earlier? I don't know. Good deal. All right. So what do we have left? Nature, sympathy, loyalty to the regiment. I think that was an interesting one. Let's see if
it actually is an interesting topic in this, because it is an important part of the book. When when Trevor was interviewed, she called it the tainted and she considers three types of people to be tainted in the book.
Okay.
The Anglo-Indians, the Anglo-Irish, but also the Irish Catholics fighting for the British Army. Okay, so they are fighting. They are British soldiers. They're part of the Empire. Okay, and they do rebel against their own army because of what's happening in Ireland at the time. At the time, the Black and Tans are doing horrendous things in Ireland, and whatever. But but there is this thing of that's not a soldier is supposed to be very loyal to his
commanding officer.
Yeah, and he's not, and they're not. They do reject this for good reason, and this is based on the true story. So this is a true story that originally inspires the book. So I think loyalty is probably a theme throughout the book, and how to be loyal to people and loyal to your own values. I think probably is a theme throughout the book, and then it occurs again and again. What do you think?
Loyal to your own values. So if we look at a cross section of the people, we've got the upper class Aylmer, who went back and never spoke about India again because he was too ashamed that his commanding, what would the other thing be? Serving officers had mutinied and like came to a head under his watch. So he like broke the chain. And we've got the sergeant who leads them all into the mutiny, who I think is definitely true to his values. Michael Flaherty, he's sort of wavering at the end. He doesn't get to choose, I think, finally in the end. So that's like the sad part. Rose, is she loyal to her values? She seems very flibberty-gibbety to me because she's so young and that was such like a stuck-up, character study that it's hard to really evaluate if she has an arc. She doesn't seem very proactive.
She doesn't have a chance to have an arc, really, does she?
Yeah.
What about the what you call the two me's? So it's what's May and what's May's brother's name? And the 1980s.
Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry. Jerry is, and his father before him are very loyal to the ecology of the
region.
Of the region that they're in. I mean, like, and they fight for it and die young for it. To protect the environment around them when nobody else is being protective of their land. So there is, and this is kind of brought out. This is like a theme that's in that book that's seems to have nothing to do with anything else, and yet it's very strongly written. Like, it's very important to both of them as well.
I like that too.
The priest, I suppose, in the beginning of the book, he's very much into you have to be nice and proper, and takes a lot of time to make sure you have to spend an hour preparing for his mass or something like that, and everything has to be like it's in a church in Ireland, even though it's in the middle of the heat. Is there anybody we've forgotten?
The young Aylmer. Okay, so Jerry. One of the interesting things about Jerry that I liked in the near the end, you see him through other people's eyes because you never get into his point of view, but you see him through other people's eyes watching people, and I felt like he was watching and going, "No, Richard's not good enough for my sister, but Mohan might be." Like this sort of like his own. Not loyalty, but his own like judgment of who is quality and whatnot. I thought that was interesting. Like you can be a good person, but you're not the right person. So I think that's part of the persistent stereotyping or like caste feeling. But yeah, I thought that was funny when we saw it happen and we're like, oh, like who's at the buffet? Like it was fun. There was some intrigue at the end that made it entertaining. Mr. Vlandis, hello. Telling us about the brigade of Irish that defected to the Mexican army during the Mexican-American War. I think there was also, that was right before Civil War, so I might be getting the two mixed up. Yeah, but I'm familiar with a similar story at least. Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, we usually wrap up with like things to look forward to, so I'll put that out there again that tomorrow at 5 a.m. Pacific time, I'll be on Barrett's channel for the first social stream of Worldwide Readathon. So that is the exciting thing happening. And this is part of the Irish Readathon, our buddy read here today. And I think I have at least one more book to do. And Maria has like the Dublin Literary Awards to chase. But yeah, I think any other questions or any other thoughts for this lovely historical fiction book that we both dove into? Good? All right, we'll let the budgies sing us out and say thank you, everybody, for coming. This is a great book. I'd pick it up. The link's in the description and in the chat, and I appreciate all your questions and your presence and time. So we'll see you again soon. If not tomorrow, another day on BookTube. Thanks, everybody.